And now, yet another somewhat scaled down version, at least in many places. There is some very simple scoring here. Simple not in a unworthy way, but more straightforward, using fewer elements to greater effect kind of scoring, which I think was really really cool, by the way. So let's start off with this first page here, and I liked the fact that there was just the side drum going through. It would have been nice to drop this drum occasionally, where there were places in which the downbeat was de-stressed in the piano version, rather than having it regular all the way through. And yet, it was nice to just have it backed off that way. So, just going straight into the scoring, it's all very effective. Fortissimo pizzicato, and the A plus B flat sort of crunching sound being spread out across the upper strings was a really nice touch. And just leaving the lower strings and violas to underline the D and E seconds. Those little crunches below. So there's nothing here that is not going to work. It's all pretty well done, pretty well balanced. If you're doing pizzicato, you don't really need to have staccato on there. I mean, maybe it makes more sense, say maybe with the cellos and the basses, but yeah, and then like staccatissimo. I think that the articulation that you're looking for is marcato, right? Because that just means it's a short, kind of savage, hammering kind of an accent. There's really kind of nothing you can do else, right? Staccatissimo, you can try to make this as dry as possible, but it's already dry because it's pizzicato. So I would say marcato, because it's in the style of the pizzicato articulation already, but it's it doesn't approach meaninglessness, right? See, here you've got a diminuendo with staccato and accents going down to mezzo piano, and you even have a staccato and an accent on mezzo piano, right? So, it sort of starts to lose meaning when you've got it on a diminuendo like that, and especially at that dynamic, right? Now here we get to another place in the music, and this is a place in which you are creating a bit of a trap for the conductor. I think that you want to continue on fortissimo on the lower strings, or forte at the very least, so that they stick out and that they balance against what's going on in English horn and the bassoon family here. Okay, but the problem is that, like, you're saying mezzo piano dolce. This isn't really a very, dolce. What's dolce about this? What's sweet about this? Kind of nothing, really. There's like kind of no sense of linear, lyrical melodicism here. It's really, playing. Usually, you don't mark dolce to a big row of staccatos. I mean, occasionally you see that, but yeah, that kind of doesn't mean a whole lot. Dolce there. So, maybe you forgot to mark mezzo piano here to sort of make everybody the same dynamic. Maybe you intended the pizzicato here to really stand out. But one way or another, you kind of have to mark. I think right here you have to indicate to the conductor that you want the pizzicato to continue. Now, you don't really mark what dynamic the side drum is, and if you don't mark it, then the default dynamic is mezzo forte, right? I'm kind of wondering whether or not you can just mark everything fortissimo sforzando. That's what I would say, like, rather than saying fortissimo, forte sforzando, not fortissimo. So forte SFZ, or you could just say forte and then FORZ period. So just like there's a forceful forte, but not necessarily like playing out there at the edge of, what the fingers can handle, right? So forte on this, mezzo forte there. Okay, so that should be your first dynamic approach. And then here, this is kind of neat to have you emerging. And to keep the bass clarinet nice and soft, this is a perfectly playable and is nicely balanced. I do like this background pedal tone here. Okay, now moving on to the English horn and bassoons. So you've got this situation where you've set up a triple octave here with, you might say lower double reeds, kind of all playing together. And it works pretty well with the way that you're matching things up. It would be nice to have these violas double the English horn, right? Rather than just doubling the bassoons. Now, here you're saying soli. You need to say a2 soli, right? And this, sometimes people mark soli because they mean this is of a group of solos with the other instrument. But generally speaking, it is more appropriate to write solo on single parts and soli on parts that are more than one. And that's really for the copyist, because the copyist will kind of know, okay, I'll write solo on each individual part, right? And then they will know what to do when they hear them all playing themselves all playing together. But so anyways, just emerging into the next expression of the melody. So I've already said forte, forzando, sforzando, right? And then this emerging up to what I would say is, instead of mezzo piano, just have these guys be mezzo forte and this be mezzo forte, and then the pizzicato down here that takes the melody forte, right? Just leave it at, and say forte sempre, right? And then you'll have a much more balanced kind of sound here, and this will not seem to be just kind of so murky and indistinct. Like the way that you've got it now, it is really way out of balance with fortissimo pizzicato here. Even though, of course, as they say, winds are stronger than strings, it's still, it is so downgraded in terms of its dynamic ability that it's pretty, just really kind of, but I think you could leave this in here, right? So say mezzo forte, then ba, 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 ba. I think that would still work. Okay, so this is just really, really nice. Bum, 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 bum. And how many of each are you playing there? How many? Right? We all know that these are single instruments, right? The tuba and bass trombone. But, it's kind of funny. The tuba doubling I guess this is probably intended to be two trombones, right? And then an octave higher, you have, what is this, A2, A4? Is this first and third? Is it, what is it? So you need to tell me how many on a part, right? Now, see, here you say A2, so you just need just small a and just, space or not a space to number 2. Like this. This works fine for me. Okay? So I think that is better. And if you really want to be technical about it, you could go, you could be like that about it, right? But I think that just, that is shorthand for everybody. But look, you don't need to put that there. You need to put it here, right? So just to mark when one voice is to be played by two players. In this situation, where you have two voices turning into one, it's kind of better and clearer to split the voices, so that you have a down stems, and when they come together, you can see the two stems playing on the same note, right? So to split the voices up, that's what I would recommend there. And then it would just be really clear, and you wouldn't need to write in this. You wouldn't even need to write in A2 at all. Okay, so. But what is this? How effective is the scoring there? Okay, well, frankly speaking, you cannot call this A2 because you got two English horns. Okay, I see what you're doing. That's a little bit outside the. That's a little outside the parameters, and forgive me if you're intending this to be A2 solo English horns. that was a little bit outside of the parameters, because remember, I was really only expecting to see like 3 oboes total, right? That was part of the way that this challenge is supposed to go, So you went out a little outside there, and that's why I was not expecting to see, 2 English horns on that part. So my apologies, but still, pretty fat, pretty beefy mid-range sound on there. And like when you've got the bassoons anyways, then you kind of don't really need an extra English horn player. All right, so that's just my feeling on it. And then here you've got sort of a space in between the bassoons and the contrabassoon. All right, now you're filling in that space with your trombones, and that's perfectly acceptable. And then you've got the tuba doubling the contrabassoon, and so it does make a very powerful sound. And I do like that. I like the tambourine coming in here, and the dun 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 rhythm with the side drum. That's all cool. Yeah, so it pretty much works. Almost feel like there need to be accents rather than staccato here, right? But you've got your staccato here because you want your pizzicato to stand out here in the lower strings. But I would say probably better idea to like have these accented, right? And to have some of the motion here, bum bum bum, bum bum bum. Right. I do like the fact that you sort of climb up here, add oboes on top of there because of the violas going up an octave. So that's nice. Okay. Anyway, pretty cool first page. Now let's take a look at the next page. Yeah. Now going on to this part right here. Dun 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 dun. This was really, really nice. I really like the tambourine and the snare drum teaming up, and I like the way that you set it up in the previous 2 bars. Okay, and I do like the fact that you're contrasting sections. Now, this is something that I can't remember the exact orchestration teacher who said this, but I think it was William Lovelock, but he was just saying, like, don't do that all the time. And you kind of don't. You do mix in the sections together, but it isn't just like one section playing and then the other and then the other. You make them interdependent, which is nice. So, I do like this. The bassoon family teaming up with the lower strings, that works really, really well. And then just the beautiful kind of dancey staccato or pizzicato. Yeah, just maybe overusing the staccato mark on the pizzicato there a little bit. That playing along with the way the horns and trumpets are scored, this is going to be very rich, beautiful golden sound here, and nice interplay with the way that the lower brass are scored there. So yeah, so this is pretty nice scoring. I really did like this part. Now, getting down to the nitty gritty, just really like this part in here, with the upper winds kind of taking on this, taking on the melody over the now dancey clarinets and bass clarinets, English horn, kind of transferring some of what's going on here across this particular group of notes to here. Now, this is interesting. So I'm wondering whether you could have done snap pizzicato here. That would have been cool. You would have had to do divisi, but it would be interesting to hear like snap pizzicato in these little cross rhythms here. And lovely the way that you punctuated them with snare drum and tambourine. So I liked that a lot. The way that this was all set up. Now here we get into some more intricate kinds of scoring with winds plus brass, and you've got like a buzz roll here. Now, if this was originally intended to be just a regular roll, but you didn't like the sound of the regular 3 beams indicating a roll, if you didn't like the sound of the playback in Note Performer, then you're not alone. A lot of people feel that it's a bit vague how to score a real honestly, honest, good sounding roll in for snare drum in Note Performer. Some people are just really not happy with it yet. In this case here, I would say, if you really intended a buzz roll, that can be really fun, but sometimes it doesn't quite carry the same way as just a standard roll, especially if you really go, if you're playing a very loud part. Because the buzz roll sort of depends on the bouncingness, the bouncing of the stick. So there's a certain amount of you can get a buzz roll to go louder, but it doesn't really have the same kind of instantaneous control that a regular roll does, I feel. Just having heard people play it, it's just a little bit more, I don't know, squishy is the wrong word, but just, doesn't quite have the same precision, is what I'm trying to say. All right, so now here, going to open horns, should have mentioned the, stopped horns. Open horns, nice. And I love the way that this is all done. So you've got your upper voice, trumpets, okay, and that is being doubled by a piccolo above, flutes on the same pitches. See, by right around here, this is kind of where it breaks down. Like, from B flat here, right? So like you start off with the first 3 bars, flute and trumpet together right there are fine, okay? Because like this is a strong area for the flute, so you've got that reinforced from above by the piccolo. Okay, great. Okay, and the oboe is sort of tracking the part, filling in with seconds from time to time, and that's working fine. But when you start getting down into this middle of the staff type of scoring for the flutes, they really do not balance that well with the trumpet. And the lower you go, the worse it gets, right? So this is a point at which you sort of have to ask yourself, would I be better off with the flutes just being up there with the piccolo, helping out the piccolo? And, and the weight of the part of the accompaniment can go to middle winds that have a sound that is more compatible, that can compete with trumpet a bit better, right? So I mean, it's not a huge crisis, but it just gets more and more ineffective the lower you go, and especially this right in here and right in here. This is just not going to, and the piccolo too, right? I mean, this is where the flute should be up there, adding some strength. It's just, the way it is now, it's just a little too weak. All right. And then we've got this, da 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 bum ba da 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 dee, right, and that's really kind of cool. I like what's going on here in the horns. I like the fact that you've got some of the, that some of the part is being, combined with lower brass. Okay, and I mean, it's a bit complicated the way that it's put together here, but it's still going to be fine. But just don't bring your flutes that low with this kind of denseness of the brass. Just especially with that much tone right there in the middle. So, all right. So we finally get to the bum 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 da da da. Okay, and I feel that this is pretty good. Nicely marked, but you've got tenuto here, okay, and you've got pizzicato, so like accented staccato, right? So all you need is the marcato mark. You don't need the accented staccato, right? This is not going to be as trompy as you like. It's, if you were to go to arco here and just have like tenuto marks, then, and have it marked fortissimo, then you would probably get a much more effective, very kind of thrusting kind of a sound here, right? And then like here, mezzo forte, right? Look at how powerful everybody else is. Why are we getting mezzo forte here in the snare drum? Or why aren't we bringing out the big guns here like bass drum or timpani, right? To just give it more bottom end. So Yeah, the dynamics overall right here, like when this entrance comes back in, I just feel it should be a bit more precise. Tell us what, what this dynamic is. And if it's different, if you are setting up a different sort of dynamic scenario than what happened before, then the brass should also be marked as to what their new role is. Because like we're going to different functions, right? That's one of my rules of like, when do you mark, when do you mark a new dynamic level, after a tacit, and that's when the function changes is a really important one, right? So even if it's kind of the same dynamic, just as long as the player is aware that that they're headed somewhere, that they can depend on what the marking is from the composer, and they're not just out there, all by themselves. Okay, so now let's look at the third and last page. So here we have some more buzz roll from snare drum. I feel that's really effective with the tambourine tremolo, and I really do like these touches. Bass drum. Now here, you don't need to do this with bass drum, right? Or this. All you need to do is just mark a quarter note. The hall, the concert hall that the bass drum is in, is going to take care of all the sustain that you need. So even if the bass drum strikes this and then damps it, the sound of that concussion is going to echo through the hall, is going to reverberate through the hall, not echo, right? And you don't need to do this either, right? So, I mean, you can write quarter note LV, so like don't damp it with the hand, but then that sets up other kinds of problems, which I'm going to save for a tip. I don't want to get into it too much and take away your evaluation time. But yeah, but just try to mark simple quarter notes in bass drum. Okay, this cymbal, that's fine. Tam-tam, that's fine. Okay, so here we have like a big tutti, and I'm just kind of curious, why is the lower horn part forte and the lower brass forte, and this is probably intended to be forte too because there's no change from the previous page. English horn, forte, probably also oboes intended to be forte. But the upper strings are marked mezzo forte. Now, why is that? Right? Why are you underpowering the main thrust of your melody? Right? Why is that? Everybody should be forte. If anything, you should be on the watch for very prominent, just very, very strong sounds being too loud. Who are the strong players here? It's the brass and the percussion, right? Now, you've got your percussion marked down to mezzo forte. So that is suggesting to me that it's the brass that should be marked mezzo forte, and everybody else should be marked forte. Just confidently marked forte, without any muss or fuss. Now, another thing that I'm wondering about, too, is why do we have 60 violin players playing this top line and like only maybe about 12 to 14 violists playing this line here, right? You have to think, so let's say we've got like, we got a nice big orchestra, okay? So 18 firsts, 16 seconds, 14 violas, right? So that means that this is going to be, it's going to be, how many players? It's going to be quite a lot, just really filling in that line. Sorry, I didn't mean to say 60, I meant to say 30. Okay. So you're going to have like over 30 players playing this one line, and you're only going to have like a little over a dozen players, a dozen violists. So if we look at the doubling, does it merit that? Okay. Now, we've got flute here in an extremely weak register, the second flute. That's not really adding anything. It would be better off if flutes were A2 up here, right? Or if you just had, like, you could have the first flute doubling this and then dropping down when it gets to C, right? And sort of supporting wherever possible, coming back in here. And then otherwise, the flute's A2. And then you have a very high clarinet part here, just really kind of screeching up there. Maybe it would be better to have like the second clarinet could take over this part here, right? And then it would sound a whole lot better. I do like the way that you've scored your double reeds here, your oboe family. I think that that's really nice. Okay, bassoons are pretty high in there. Kind of wonder whether like how important is it to put so much weight on the top voice of the bassoons here? When it's already doubled by the oboe right there. So, is there a way of scoring this so that the bassoon isn't quite so like up there and it's very pale, a little weaker register, in general? So, and also considering like where the trombones are. But I mean, look, it's not badly scored, but it just there are some octaves that need adjusting, and please don't score brass louder than strings in a tutti like this, or winds softer than brass when brass have got big parts sticking out of the texture. Maybe maybe there just wasn't time to edit this the right way. Maybe you were thinking about that. I don't know. Anyway, so that's just my advice. This is nice. This big squeak up here. That's neat. I like that. This is really good. Oboe right underneath piccolo. They have a beautiful affinity for one another, and this is just going to work in a really nice way. I don't really have a problem with that. You sort of lose some brass energy here, but it's nice to have this. Now, okay, so triangle roll is going to sound like, if you're going to go from fortissimo down to mezzo forte, you sort of have marked it. You've marked it like 16th notes. It really should be marked more like this. If you like, it's going to sound kind of like a telephone ringing with that sort of slower tremolo. Okay, so I mean, if you intended to evoke a telephone ringing, then that's fine. Yeah, the only problem. Yeah, I'm just wondering about this leading into this, whether or not that's clear. Okay, but anyway. So I think here is the spot at which maybe I'm wondering, since the scoring is so barren here, whether or not you might have run out of time here. You might have intended things to be bigger, or who knows, maybe you intended this to be more, just more of a break for the winds. Okay, if so, you have to be a little bit more careful about how you score your dynamics. F espressivo on the piccolo, fortissimo on the oboes, right? Mezzo forte on the clarinets, and the bassoon isn't marked on this page, so I don't know what it was intended to be. So these are all sort of mixed up. So if you felt that things weren't really balancing on this when you were listening to your playback, then that is why. It's just because like the last thing that the playback engine remembers is these sort of mixed dynamics. So you have to watch out when you stack octaves like this that the part doesn't become just really a lot like an organ, right? When you're dealing with lots of octaves tracking each other like this, and especially the upper part of the music, you've got you got octaves and ninths sort of stacked up like this, and then they tend to just sort of they sort of reinforce each other's harmonics all the way up, just sort of like pipes in a church. And then you get a more sort of pipey type of sound, rather than just really hearing the more unique sounds of the winds, right? That would be my thing there. So if you wanted to get rid of that, it's very simple. Just add some strings, right? Just have the strings kind of double along with this. But you've already done that here, right? So that I can see that would be a problem. Well, I don't want the first part of B to sound exactly like the second part of B, and then so on. I like the way you crawl down here, getting lower and lower, and you bring in a little bit of string doubling here. I think the doubling could cover other higher parts, before we get down there. But still, it's kind of nice. It's nice that you let the winds work on their own, but I'm just wondering if there's more you could do here to make this a little bit more, a little bit more delicate, and just rather than maybe so much brute force, right, with the stacked octaves. Okay, and this is nice. I feel this could be more aggressive. This, da 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 da. I think that could be, just have a little bit more push, right? Maybe this is where brass could just just be underlining the first note of each of these couplets, right? And this is nice, right? And there's a little bit of support from snare, right? But like dynamic of forte, shouldn't it be? Or even fortissimo. I mean, there needs to be some push here, right? So that you're really launching into the next part where we go back to the recap. Well, look, I could talk on and on about this entry because there's so many really cool things about it. And, if I have laid this open and really, gone to town on, what works and what doesn't, and, what possibly could be improved and so on, it's just because the score kind of deserves that much attention and that much of my time in trying to sort of help you make it even more enticing, more interesting than it is already. So, how ready is it to go to the stands with an orchestra rehearsal? Still would need maybe another, a few days work on fixing some of the balance things and clarifying things for the conductor, and maybe working out what was comfortable for the players. There's a lot of things in here that I didn't talk about. If people are watching this publicly on YouTube, if we get to that phase with some of our Patreon entries, just because I didn't notice or didn't mention something doesn't mean that I didn't notice it, right? Just because I didn't bring something up, because otherwise I would be here for an hour. It's really hard for me to keep it down to around 10 minutes per page or 10 minutes per section of feedback, because then that would sort of turn into a big coaching session, which isn't exactly what I'm intending to offer with these challenges. So anyways, but really enjoyed this. Just really some great ideas here, David, and looking forward, if you can participate in next year's orchestration challenge, just would be really curious to see how you dealt with some of the things that are coming up with that particular piece of music, which you'll have to wait for me to announce in 11 months. All right, so thanks so much, and now on to the next Brev supporter score.